The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. "Dad, I'm getting married tomorrow. I took the $85,000 from your account and sold the house. Bye." Those were the last words my son, Nathan, spoke before setting a match to his entire future. My name is Henry Blackwood, and in that moment, I listened to my own child steal from me, calling it justice. Nathan thought he was robbing a broke old man who drove a beat-up Honda and clipped coupons. What he didn't know was that I owned the $4.8 million company he worked for. I owned the wedding venue where he was getting married tomorrow. Hell, I'd been paying his salary for 5 years while he called me a financial failure. Nathan wanted to humiliate me one last time before cutting me out of his life forever. Instead, he just handed me the perfect opportunity to teach him what real power looks like. 300 wedding guests were about to witness the most brutal family lesson in corporate history. If you've ever been underestimated by someone who should respect you, hit subscribe. I'd love to know where you're watching from, because what happened next at his wedding reception will shock you. Let me explain how I became the father Nathan decided to rob. After my wife, Elizabeth, died of cancer in 2019, I made a choice. Nathan was 24, fresh out of college with a business degree and an attitude bigger than his bank account. He needed to learn the value of work, so I kept my mouth shut about what I really did for a living. Nathan saw me driving my 2015 Honda Civic with 142,000 miles on it. He saw my one-bedroom apartment that cost $100 a month. He saw me clipping coupons and shopping at thrift stores. What he didn't see was why. "Dad, when are you going to get a real job?" he'd say during our monthly dinners. "Property management is for people who couldn't make it in real business." I'd just nod and change the subject. The truth was, I was paying off Elizabeth's medical bills. Even with insurance, her 2-year fight with cancer had cost us $180,000 out of pocket. I could have paid it all at once, but I wanted Nathan to see struggle. I wanted him to understand that money isn't magic, it's earned. But Nathan didn't see sacrifice, he saw failure. "Look at my friend Jake's dad," Nathan would continue. "He owns 3 restaurants, drives a Mercedes, lives in a real house, not some cramped apartment." I kept quiet. Let him think what he wanted to think. Meanwhile, Nathan got hired at Pinnacle Manufacturing as an operations manager. $45,000 a year. Not bad for someone with 0 experience. He moved into a luxury apartment that cost $3,200 a month, bought a BMW X5, and started wearing suits that cost more than my monthly rent. "How can you afford all this?" I asked him once. "I'm good with money, Dad. Unlike some people." The insults were small at first. Comments about my dead-end job. Jokes about how I'd never amount to anything. He'd pay for dinner sometimes, making a big show of pulling out his credit card. "Don't worry about it, Dad. I know money's tight for you." 6 months ago, things got worse. Nathan met Rebecca, a surgeon's daughter with expensive tastes. Suddenly, my son needed to prove he was worthy of her world. The engagement ring cost $12,000. The wedding venue was Grandview Estate. Capacity 300. Minimum cost $50,000. "Dad, I'm going to need to borrow some money," he said last Christmas. "How much?" "Maybe $30,000. I'll pay you back." I said yes, of course. Transferred the money the next day. But Nathan never said thank you. Never acknowledged it as generosity. In his mind, I owed him. That's when I realized my teaching method had backfired. Instead of learning humility, Nathan had learned contempt. Instead of respecting struggle, he'd learned to despise it. The final straw came 3 weeks ago. Nathan brought Rebecca to meet me at my apartment. She was polite enough, but I could see her taking inventory. The second-hand furniture, the small TV, the discount store dishes. After she excused herself to the bathroom, Nathan leaned close. "Dad, please don't embarrass me at the wedding. Maybe just stay in the back. Don't mention your job or where you live." I looked at my son, really looked at him. Designer clothes, perfect teeth from orthodontics I'd paid for, college education that cost $160,000, and he was ashamed of me. "I understand," I said quietly. But what I understood was this. I had raised a stranger who valued image over character, money over family, status over love. And in 2 weeks, this stranger would discover exactly who he'd been looking down on. I just didn't know he'd steal from me first. After Nathan's call, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my apartment staring at the banking app on my phone. Sure enough, my personal savings account showed a balance of $847. Yesterday, it had been $85,000. But the money wasn't what hurt most. I pulled up my call history. Nathan had contacted me exactly 3 times in the past 6 months. Once to ask for money, once to complain about his job, and now to tell me he'd stolen from me. This wasn't just theft. This was erasure. Nathan had decided I didn't matter. My feelings didn't matter. My financial security didn't matter. In his mind, I was just some pathetic old man whose only purpose was funding his lifestyle. The house sale was the cruelest part. That 2-bedroom ranch on Maple Street wasn't worth much, maybe $85,000 in this market. But it was the house where Elizabeth and I had planned to retire, where we'd dreamed of hosting grandchildren for Christmas morning. Nathan had forged my signature on the deed transfer, somehow convinced a notary I'd agreed to sell. The closing had happened yesterday at 3 p.m., according to my email. While I was at work, my real work, Nathan was liquidating my past. But here's what Nathan didn't understand about stakes. If I stayed silent, if I let this slide, I wouldn't just lose money, I'd lose myself. 20 years of building a business, creating jobs, contributing to my community, all of it would be meaningless if I couldn't protect my own dignity from my own son. More importantly, Nathan would never learn. He'd go through life thinking he could take from people weaker than him, use them, discard them. The woman he was marrying deserved to know who she was really getting. I opened the manila folder from my safe. Inside were documents Nathan had never seen. Stock certificates, board resolutions, incorporation papers from March 15th, Tatum 4. Pinnacle Manufacturing Corporation, founded by Henry Blackwood and Victoria Sterling. Initial investment, $50,000 each. Current company valuation, $4.8 million. My ownership percentage, 60%. Nathan's boss, Victoria Sterling, was my business partner. Had been for 15 years. She knew about Nathan, of course. Knew I was his father. But Nathan had never bothered to ask about her connection to some old property manager named Henry Blackwood. Why would he? In Nathan's world, successful people didn't associate with failures like me. I scrolled through my contacts and found Victoria's number. It was almost midnight, but this couldn't wait. "Henry, is everything okay?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. "Victoria, we need to talk. Nathan stole from me." A long pause. "How much?" $85,000. Plus he sold my house without permission. Jesus, what do you want to do? What did I want to do? For 20 years, I'd protected Nathan from the truth about our family's wealth. I'd let him think he'd earned his position at Pinnacle through merit, not nepotism. I'd let him believe his salary came from his own competence, not his father's charity. But that was over. I want him to face the consequences. I told Victoria. All of them. "Are you sure, Henry? This could destroy him." "He's already destroyed me, Victoria. Now it's time he understood what that feels like." The next morning, I stood in the back of the Grandview Estate ballroom. The wedding reception was in full swing, a symphony of expensive laughter and clinking glasses. Nathan, beaming in his tailored tuxedo, was dancing with Rebecca, her white gown shimmering under the chandeliers. He looked like the picture of success, the man he'd always pretended to be. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "He's here. Conference room." I nodded, a grim satisfaction settling in my gut. Nathan was led into the conference room by Douglas Kane, our corporate attorney. Victoria was already there, sitting at the head of the polished mahogany table. Nathan looked confused, then annoyed. "Victoria, what's going on? It's my wedding day." Victoria's expression was unreadable. "Nathan, we need to discuss some serious matters concerning your employment at Pinnacle Manufacturing." Nathan scoffed. "Can't this wait? It's my reception." "No, it cannot." Douglas Kane interjected, his voice firm. "This concerns a substantial breach of company policy, and frankly, the law." Nathan's bravado began to falter. "What are you talking about?" Victoria leaned forward. "Yesterday you transferred $85,000 from an unauthorized account. You also forged documents to sell property that didn't belong to you." Nathan's face went pale. That's impossible. I took money from my father's account. The house was in his name. Was it? Douglas Kane slid a document across the table. Property deed, dated March 2023. Owner, Blackwood Holdings LLC. Nathan, your father doesn't own that house. This company does. Nathan stared at the document, his eyes wide with disbelief. This doesn't make sense. My dad lives paycheck to paycheck. He drives a beat-up Honda. He clips coupons. Does he? Victoria pulled out her phone and showed Nathan a photo. It was taken last month at the National Manufacturing Association conference. The photo showed Victoria shaking hands with someone at a podium. The caption read, CEO Victoria Sterling congratulates founding partner Henry Blackwood on 20-year company anniversary. Nathan's hands were trembling as he looked at the photo. That's my dad. Yes, it is, but he's just a property manager. Nathan, your father owns 60% of this company. He's worth approximately $4.8 million. The room went completely silent. Nathan stared at the photo, then at the property deed, then back at Victoria. That's impossible. Douglas Kane pulled out another document. Employment contract. Nathan Blackwood, Operations Manager, Pinnacle Manufacturing. Hired September 2019. Yeah, I got the job on my own merit. Did you? Kane flipped to page 3 of the contract. At the bottom, a signature. Henry Blackwood, founding partner. Your father hired you, Nathan. Your salary comes from his company. Your BMW is financed through our corporate credit union. Your apartment lease has Pinnacle Manufacturing as a guarantor. Nathan was shaking his head rapidly. No, that's not. I earned everything I have. You earned nothing, Victoria said quietly. For 5 years, your father has been subsidizing your entire lifestyle while you insulted him for being poor. Why? Nathan's voice cracked. Why would he lie to me? He didn't lie. You never asked. Victoria stood up and walked to the window overlooking the reception. We could see Rebecca talking to her parents, probably wondering where her new husband had disappeared to. Nathan, your father wanted you to learn the value of work, so he let you believe you'd made it on your own. But yesterday, when you stole from him and called him a failure, you crossed a line. What line? You stole from the majority owner of this corporation. Douglas Kane opened his final folder. Nathan Blackwood, by vote of the Board of Directors, your employment with Pinnacle Manufacturing is hereby terminated, effective immediately. You can't fire me. We just did. Nathan shot to his feet. Victoria, please. I didn't know. If you had known your father was wealthy, you would have treated him with respect? That's exactly the problem, Nathan. Victoria returned to her seat. Your father spent 20 years building this company, creating jobs, contributing to the community, and you dismissed all of that because he drove an old car and lived modestly. I'll apologize. I'll pay him back. With what money? As of this moment, your corporate credit cards are canceled. Your company car will be repossessed tomorrow. Your apartment lease will be terminated within 30 days. Nathan sank back into his chair. My wedding. Rebecca's family is watching through those windows. Indeed they were. Dr. Morrison stood near the conference room windows, clearly able to see the serious discussion taking place inside. Nathan, Victoria continued, your father gave you every opportunity to show character, to show gratitude, to show basic human decency. Instead, you showed him greed and contempt. What am I supposed to tell Rebecca? The truth, that you're not who you pretended to be. Douglas Kane was packing up his documents. Security will escort you from the premises tomorrow to collect your personal belongings. Victoria, please. I made a mistake. No, Nathan. You made a choice. Multiple choices. And choices have consequences. Victoria stood up. This meeting is concluded. As Nathan sat frozen in his chair, Victoria walked to the conference room door. Through the glass, I could see Rebecca approaching with her parents. Nathan, Victoria said gently, your wife is coming. You might want to compose yourself. But Nathan couldn't compose himself. His entire world had just collapsed, and 300 wedding guests were about to watch it happen. The conference room door opened. Rebecca stepped inside, still in her wedding dress. Honey, is everything okay? You've been in here for almost an hour. Nathan looked up at his new wife. the surgeon's daughter who'd married a successful businessman. Except that businessman no longer existed. Rebecca, we need to talk. Rebecca entered the conference room with Dr. Morrison and Patricia Morrison behind her. The confusion on their faces was evident. Why was Nathan's wedding reception being interrupted by what looked like a corporate tribunal? Nathan, what's going on? Rebecca's voice carried the first hint of worry I'd heard from her all day. Nathan couldn't speak. He sat staring at the documents scattered across the table like they were written in a foreign language. Victoria stepped forward. Mrs. Blackwood, I'm Victoria Sterling, CEO of Pinnacle Manufacturing. I'm afraid we've had to deliver some difficult news to your husband. Difficult news? On our wedding day? Dr. Morrison moved closer to the table, his experienced eyes taking in the legal documents. Is Nathan in some kind of trouble? That depends on your definition of trouble, Douglas Kane replied. I chose that moment to enter the conference room. Rebecca turned toward me, relief flooding her face. Henry, thank goodness. Can you tell me what's going on? Her parents, however, looked at me with open suspicion. Dr. Morrison, a man used to being in control, demanded, Mr. Blackwood, what is your involvement in this? I looked at Nathan, whose face was now a mask of shame and fury. I'm the reason Nathan has a job, Dr. Morrison. I'm the reason he has a car, an apartment, and the money to pay for this wedding. Rebecca's eyes widened. What are you talking about? Nathan, I said, my voice calm but firm. Tell your wife and her parents the truth. Tell them who you really are. Nathan tried to speak, but no words came out. He just stared at the table, defeated. Fine, I said. I'll tell them. And I did. I told them everything. About Elizabeth's medical bills, about my decision to let Nathan believe he was self-made, about his constant insults, about his theft, and about his termination. As I spoke, Rebecca's face crumpled. Dr. Morrison's jaw tightened, and Patricia Morrison gasped, covering her mouth. When I finished, the silence in the room was deafening. Rebecca finally broke it, her voice barely a whisper. Nathan, is this true? Nathan nodded, his head still down. Yes, he choked out. All of it. Rebecca looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. Why, Henry? Why would you do this to him? On our wedding day? Because, Rebecca, I said, your husband stole from me. He forged documents to sell my home. And he did it all while believing I was a pathetic old man he could walk all over. He needed to learn that actions have consequences, and that respect is earned, not inherited. Dr. Morrison stepped forward, his face a thundercloud. Nathan, is this the kind of man you are? A thief? A liar? Nathan finally looked up, his eyes bloodshot. I didn't know, Dad. I didn't know you owned the company. I thought you were poor. And if I were poor, Nathan, I replied, would that make it okay to steal from me? To treat me with contempt? He had no answer. Rebecca looked from Nathan to me, then back to Nathan. I can't believe this. Patricia Morrison put a comforting hand on her daughter's arm. Rebecca, we need to leave. No, Nathan cried, finally finding his voice. Rebecca, please, I love you. I made a mistake. Rebecca shook her head, tears streaming down her face. A mistake, Nathan? Or a pattern of behavior? You lied to me. You lied to everyone. Who are you? Dr. Morrison turned to me. Mr. Blackwood, what are the legal ramifications of this? Nathan stole $85,000 and committed felony forgery, Douglas Kane stated. The company is pressing charges. However, Mr. Blackwood has offered a conditional agreement. If Nathan repays the full amount within 2 years, the criminal charges will be dropped. Otherwise, we proceed. 2 years? Nathan exclaimed. I don't have a job. How am I supposed to do that? That, Nathan, I said, is your problem to solve. For the first time in your life, you'll have to earn your own way. Rebecca, still crying, looked at her parents. Mom, Dad, what do I do? Dr. Morrison put his arm around her. You come home with us, sweetheart. We'll figure this out. He looked at Nathan with disgust. You, young man, have a lot to answer for. As Rebecca was led out of the conference room by her parents, she glanced back at Nathan, her expression a mix of heartbreak and betrayal. Nathan reached out a hand, but she was already gone. I stayed in the conference room, watching the wedding guests through the window. The music had stopped. The dancing had ceased. Whispers spread like wildfire as news of the confrontation reached the ballroom. The wedding cake, a towering confection of white frosting and delicate flowers, stood untouched. It was a monument to a dream that had shattered. Later, as the last of the guests trickled out, leaving behind a scene of champagne flutes and uneaten appetizers, I found myself alone with Rebecca's parents. Dr. Morrison, a man who had clearly valued reputation above all else, was surprisingly calm. "Henry," he said, "I owe you an apology. I misjudged you." "No need, doctor," I replied. "You saw what you were meant to see." "What about Rebecca?" Patricia Morrison asked, her voice soft. "She loves him, despite everything." "Love isn't enough when there's no trust," I said. "Nathan has a long road ahead of him if he wants to earn that back." I finished my cake and set down the plate. "Dr. Morrison, I spent 20 years married to a woman who loved me when I was building this company in a garage. She stayed with me through failure, through poverty, through cancer treatments that cost more than most people's houses. Elizabeth sounds like a remarkable woman. She was, and she never would have married someone who stole from his own father." As if summoned by our conversation, Rebecca approached. Her wedding makeup was ruined, but she'd stopped crying. "Henry, can I ask you something?" "Of course. In your opinion, is Nathan capable of changing?" It was the question I'd been dreading, the question that forced me to choose between hope and honesty. "Rebecca, Nathan is 29 years old. He spent 5 years believing he earned success that was actually given to him. He spent those same 5 years insulting the man who made that success possible. That's not an answer. People can change, Rebecca, but only if they want to, and only if the consequences of not changing are worse than the effort of changing." She nodded slowly. "Nathan has never had real consequences before, has he?" "No. I made sure of that. That was my mistake." Rebecca looked across the room at her new husband, who was explaining to another group of guests why he'd been fired from his father's company. "I need to think," she said finally. "Take all the time you need. But Rebecca, yes, whatever you decide, make sure you're deciding based on who Nathan is today, not who you hope he might become." She walked away, and I was left standing next to a wedding cake that nobody wanted to eat, at a reception that nobody wanted to attend. The perfect metaphor for Nathan's new reality. 3 months later, Nathan called me. "Dad, I got a job. Congratulations." "What kind of job?" "Warehouse supervisor at a logistics company. $32,000 a year." I did the math quickly. At that salary, it would take Nathan almost 6 years to repay what he'd stolen, not the 2 years I'd given him. "Nathan, that's not enough." "I know. I'm working weekends at a restaurant too, waiting tables." "And Rebecca?" A long pause. "Rebecca moved back in with her parents. She says she needs time to figure out if she married me or the idea of me." "That's fair. Dad, I've been thinking about what you said, about never earning anything. And you were right. I got the job at Pinnacle because you owned the company. I got the apartment because you guaranteed the lease. Even my credit cards were tied to your business. What are you going to do about it?" "I'm going to earn it back. All of it. Not just the money I stole, but your respect." I was standing in my real apartment, not the modest one-bedroom I'd maintained for Nathan's benefit, but the penthouse I'd bought after Elizabeth died. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The view of Pinnacle Manufacturing's headquarters in the distance. "Nathan, my respect isn't something you can earn back." "What do you mean?" "Respect is earned through consistent actions over time. You can't buy it with money or good intentions. You have to build it, choice by choice, day by day. Then I'll build it. Maybe. But Nathan." "Yeah? I'm not waiting around to see if you will. I'm 68 years old. I've spent 20 years hoping you'd become someone I could be proud of. That's over. Dad, I'll honor our agreement. If you repay the money within 2 years, the criminal charges disappear. But our relationship, that's something you'll have to rebuild from scratch." "How do I do that?" "The same way I built this company, one honest day's work at a time." I hung up and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Nathan was probably getting ready for his weekend restaurant shift, learning for the first time what it felt like to earn minimum wage plus tips. Maybe he'd learned something useful. Maybe he wouldn't. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. The next morning, Victoria and I met for our weekly coffee. She was reviewing architectural plans for our next expansion. How's Nathan doing? He's working. We'll see if he's learning. Any regrets about how you handled the wedding? I thought about Rebecca in her wedding dress, about Dr. Morrison's confused face, about 300 guests watching a family destroy itself in real time. None, I said finally. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Victoria smiled. Think he'll make it? I hope so, but I'm not betting on it. If you're watching this, I hope you remember that respect isn't inherited. It's earned. And sometimes the best way to help someone you love is to stop helping them. Where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments below.